The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 186. Don, this is going to air on, I believe, September 9th. It is fall already. I got my brown long sleeve Cove Brown shirt on, courtesy of West Delks, and fall's here, buddy. It's time to get serious.
Well, season's already open for you. It's still about 3 weeks away for me, but have you had any luck yet?
I only hunted opening night and then Sunday night. So I've season's been open for 7 days now, and I've hunted 2 of them. I didn't have time this week, and it got really, really hot again. Holiday weekend, Monday, it was back up, I think, heat index of like 102. But opening night, I saw 46 deer with 19 bucks, which is crazy. I don't know that I've ever seen that many. But the amount of food that I have, it was cool weather. We had a westerly wind. So I got to hunt in that new 360 blind that I set up on the hallway that we built. But yeah, the odd thing is that I want to really keep track of and probably pick your brain as the year goes on, is I had 10 yearling bucks, spikes and fork horns. And I don't remember ever having that many young bucks on the property at one time. So we'll see how many stick around and what they do all year, but I don't remember ever having 10 younger bucks like that. And really odd. Saw a lot of deer using the hallway, saw a lot of deer using the structure in the food plots. I believe the second night, Sunday night, the temperatures got up a little bit higher. It was about 10 degrees warmer, and I think I saw about 18 or 19 deer that night. But after Monday, it really shut down, and I think it's because of that heat. It's either the heat or everybody racing to the woods just because they want to hunt opening weekend, and it was holiday weekend and the pressure hit. But that's how it is sometimes on small properties. But I think it has more to do with the weather getting real hot again. So we got a little bit of a cooler snap coming in. I don't know what about you up there, but I think Saturday and Sunday is supposed to be a high 78, 79 with lows in the 50s. So I would anticipate that deer movement would get a little bit better again this weekend.
Well, based on my cell cameras, and you're absolutely right about the weather. It's those hot days again. We had a couple of really warm periods with a cool down in between, and my buck sightings went up during that cool period, and they went down during those warmer periods, and by a significant margin too. I mean, we're talking 10% the number of pictures during those hot periods than what I would get during the cool period. So it's definitely tied to the temperature.
I noticed something else, and I don't know if you've seen this on your place or not. Of course, we're back dry again. We got some real timely rains middle of August, but we've been really dry since. And, we talked last week about getting food plots in. It was time. But what I've noticed is since it got really dry after the third cut of alfalfa here, the deer are just not hitting that alfalfa real hard right now. And I don't know if the palatability is down, but I'm telling you what, I bet they've eaten 10 to 12 inches out of the top of the soybean field. I mean, my utilization cages, there's probably 10 inches of difference where it wasn't like that, 3-4 weeks ago. So I don't know if it's just because of the drought or the cycle of the alfalfa not getting fresh growth, but they are absolutely hammering soybeans right now.
That kind of surprises me, actually, that right after you cut alfalfa, it greens right back up in a hurry. And that alfalfa has got roots that are 6 or 8 foot deep. So we can get down and get some moisture most of the time and green right back up. Kind of a very interesting observation, because I would expected them to be on the alfalfa more than the soybeans.
I noticed it when I was hunting Saturday night, because as the sun went down, you could just see the glare of the stems sticking up. There was no leaves on the top of the canopy, but it was the whole field. And I went back over to work and put batteries in a cell camera on Monday morning. Well, I guess it was probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I walked out into the field and looked at the utilization cage, and I'm not kidding. It looks like 10 inches have been eaten out of the whole field. So I don't know. I'm sure they're still eating some alfalfa, but they are gravitating very heavy to soybeans right now. So there's got to be something to it as far as tissue analysis that if I had time, I'd probably go and nerd out on it a little bit.
And it might even be the amount of moisture in those soybean leaves compared to that small regrowth on that alfalfa.
Yeah. I don't know. Just interesting. I'm going to keep my eye on it a little bit, but definitely still need rain. We had a chance for some this week, but we didn't get it. How's the weather been up there? I'm assuming that it's still dry and crops are starting to come out.
It is dry. They harvested a cornfield right next to me one day this week, probably Wednesday or so. Most of the crops are still in, but they're drying down in a hurry. I mean, you can just almost see the difference day to day in the cornfields. They'll be hitting it pretty hard within the next week or so, I would guess. We're dry as can be. We could use an inch of rain in a bad way. My fall plots are up, but I mean, they're just barely up and they're doing nothing because of lack of moisture.
Yeah. Would you rather them be setting like yours is right now, or like mine is where they haven't even germinated yet?
Probably like mine. Yeah, I mean, I got good germination. The plants are there. They're just kind of stunted waiting for a rain. As soon as they get a rain, it'll just explode and
They'll take off.
have a green carpet.
Well, we didn't even talk about this, but since we're talking about being dry and being close to harvest, it was my understanding that Dwayne went out to check the NutriCrave deer corn crop, because we're getting ready to make preparations to harvest that, dry it, get it bagged, and get it out to everybody. Did you hear of any update on that, or are we going to be another week before we have news for people?
Well, I know he went and got some samples. He was going to do a moisture test to see what that, before we can bag it for storage safely, it needs to be 14%. And it was well above that. But, with the conditions that we've been having, hot, dry, and a good breeze, the corn crop can lose 1% of moisture each day.
Yeah.
So, in a week's time, it can drop 7% moisture.
Well, we'll keep everybody. I know we're getting a lot of questions coming in on when that corn's going to be available. We'll keep everybody updated on that as we go through the next week, and maybe by next week's podcast, we'll have actual dates of harvest. But yeah, I checked some ears in my plot this weekend. I had really good cross-pollination in mine. It looked really, really good. I did 1 out of every 5 rows for cross-pollination. So I know that we're keeping that a little bit as far as the secret sauce about how we're doing it for production. But I can't wait for people to get their hands on this and use it this year. But we got to get it out of the field first. We'll let everybody know as soon as we get there. Before we move on, I know some people have reached out and asked for an update on Andrea, and I know you had a few words that you wanted to say as people have, I think, poured out a lot of support for you and your family this week.
Yeah, I announced last week on the podcast about my daughter Andrea being diagnosed with cancer, and asking for prayers, and you guys you poured it out. I got so many messages. It was unbelievable. A lot of you said that your whole church would be praying. You would put her on the prayer list of your church. I'd say over 100 people put her on the prayer list at their churches. So well over 100 churches. Probably, I mean, I seriously, there's got to be thousands of people praying for her, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. She did, I think before last week's recording, she had to go in for a PET scan to see if the cancer had spread anywhere else. And good news there, they had not found cancer anywhere else. So, we think it's just located in the breast and the lymph nodes in her armpit. The bad news, I guess, if there's always good and always bad. I've been told this by folks that have dealt with cancer, to expect both all the time. You're going to get some good news and you're going to get up, and then you're going to turn around and get bad news and you're going to get back down. And I'm learning more about cancer in the last couple of weeks than I ever dreamed I would know, especially about breast cancer. But, there's different kinds of chemotherapy, and they've got to determine your specific kind of cancer before they can, prescribe the right chemo. And apparently she's going to have some of the worst chemo you could possibly have. She had to go in, I think it was yesterday, she went in for a echocardiogram test for her heart to make sure that her heart's going to be able to handle this chemo. So she's definitely got a rough road ahead. That chemo is going to be hard on her, and just appreciate everybody to continue to keep her in your prayers. And I don't know, Monday I'm taking her to another oncologist in Indianapolis for a second opinion. And I suspect she'll be starting chemo shortly after that. But I don't know. It's just the unknowing is the hard part. But I'm just so grateful for everyone that's reached out. I mean, I've got texts, I've got emails, I've got phone calls, I got private messages on social media, just more than I could hardly keep up with. I tried to reply to everyone. So some of you got a very brief reply, and that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate it. It just means that I had so many. I was trying to give everybody a reply, and certainly appreciate that. So thank you for that.
I think if you look at some of the things that we don't do very well on this podcast, is sometimes we kind of vent and complain. And I know people take it the wrong way about the idiots on social media and the haters, but I think, in this case, what a blessing to have all of these followers that can rally around you. And I think in this case, both of us kind of complain about social media sometimes, but you talk about how God uses things for the good and Satan tries to tear them down. In this case, I think there's a lot of people that are rallying around your family and offering up prayers, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And, she's documenting her journey on her own social media. So if you want to follow along, her name is Andrea Hamilton. If you find her, we will be mutual friends, or you can just go to my social media and I've shared some of her posts, and you can follow her that way. But you can follow her journey, and you can live the ups and downs that we go through, because she's posting pretty much as they're happening. And I don't know. I never thought I'd be in this situation. It's almost, I mean, it consumes your every waking moment. That's all you think about all day long, no matter what you're doing. And like I said last week, it gives me a whole new appreciation for the Lester's Feet families that we try to help. Now I know what they go through, but some of them are going through things much worse than this situation. But we still got a lot of hope, and some of those families have no hope.
Well, I talked to you about this week when I called to check on you, and we don't talk a whole lot actually through the week. People find that odd that we text or email or chat real quick about business stuff, but we don't really talk that much during the week. And I called just to check on you this week. And both when I was going through Casey, my wife, having cancer, and then having some health problems with my son after he was born, I remember just feeling so helpless because, I think a lot of, especially men, just want to fix everything. That's kind of our job, is we take the burden of fixing stuff. And sometimes we're a bull in a china closet trying to fix it when we don't need to. But in the case when you're looking at a sick family member, it's just so helpless, because you'd switch places with them without the blink of an eye. You give up anything to take it away from a child, your kid, no matter how old they are, or your wife. And I feel for you, man. I know what it's like. Personally, I know what it's like. I've told Corey the same thing. And all we can do is trust in God and keep praying. I'm glad that there's a lot of very smart doctors out there that have dedicated their life to this type of illness. So I know that she'll be in good hands and researching everything. You want to give a quick update? I think that the speaking engagement that you're going to have in Sullivan's coming up. I know in my case, it's Tuesday night of next week, or this coming week, that we'll be in Napanee, Indiana. And I just got word that the prodigy Wes Delks is going to be there with me. He sent me a message earlier today that said he was coming up for it. So if you're coming and you've never met Wes, you'll get to meet Wes and Austin. They'll both be there. And I did hear, believe it or not, that I'm actually staying in the same cabin I think you've stayed in up there, with special guests Ray and Aiden, and I'm supposed to bring them both a pair of Sepratech underwear, and I'm trying to figure out what color camouflage underwear to bring them, but I'm not sure yet. I'll have to figure that out next week.
Well, I will leave the corn jokes out of it. But yeah, you're speaking on Tuesday. I'm speaking on Friday of this week. So, and I just talked to Wes today. He's going to be at my event as well. So
he's doing the tour,
making the rounds this week.
We ought to just let him go up and talk. He's turned into quite the preacher. Did you watched his Sunday night prayer time on Chasing Giants TV? Didn't you?
I did, and he preaches at his church from time to time.
Yeah.
So
maybe I'll just do a alternate and just introduce and let him come up and do an impromptu thing Tuesday night. How about that?
It'd be worth seeing.
All right. Well, I think if you can still come to both events. They've already said that they're packed houses, but if you still want to come, give those numbers a call. I'll put those up on the screen right now. But if you're still interested, reach out to them. Do you have the number handy for your event?
I do. If anybody wants to come to that event next Friday evening, you can call Curtis at 217-254-1409, or you can call Mike at 217-620-8806. And you guys, if you're coming, you might as well make a weekend of it. It's on Friday night, $30 for a ribeye supper. And then that also includes breakfast the next morning. You can camp right there where this event's at, or there's other campgrounds in the area. It's right on Lake Shelbyville. Lake Shelbyville is an 11,000 acre lake. Got great fishing. You can camp, fish, stay the whole weekend, come to church with me on Sunday morning. The whole works, but that $30, it's going to cover your ribeye supper Friday night, as well as your breakfast on Saturday morning. So hope to see a bunch of you there.
And the event in Napanee, Indiana on Tuesday night, September 12th, the number is 574-209-2065. And I started looking at some of these raffle items. There's some big raffle items and prizes that they give away at this thing too. So it's a pretty big event. The doors are going to open at 3:00 and seminars start at 5, dinners at 6:15. So looking forward to seeing a big group of people there. at both events. So let's take a quick break and listen to our spot from Osseo Gear. Make sure you check out their website. They got a lot of new gear for this year, including base layers, a new backpack, and a new design on this collar I'm really excited about for the upcoming season.
Osseo Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics, give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. Osseo has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit asiogear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
Well, Don, this episode is probably the most anticipated episode I have every year, listening to you and what you prepare each week, and that is the buck forecast, because you have this different perspective than I think most people do, and that's the number of trail cameras you run across a big geography and how you keep track of bucks from year to year. And I'm going to set this up just a little bit before you go into it. I think the way you use trail cameras probably sets you up to do this a little bit better than a lot of people, because you're focused so much on annual data of year after year after year of bucks, that when you see a buck at 2, 3, or 4 that stands out, you start documenting every single little thing you can from that deer from year to year. So I think from the perspective of a buck forecast and knowing what antler growth is and what we think bucks have done, how many lived, that type of thing, I really think that way that you use trail cameras for hunting information puts a little bit different spin than most hunters on this. So I'm really curious about what you've seen this year, if the drought has any bearing on what you think you saw, and get into your 2023 buck forecast.
Well, I'll just get right to the point, Terry. I think from what I've seen, 2023 is the buck crop that I'm seeing out there is the worst that I can ever remember in my life. It's even as bad as right after 2012 when we had the real bad EHD outbreak. Folks, the deer herds across the Midwest. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be some giants killed. There is every year. There's always going to be giants killed. But when we start talking about numbers of good deer, and I'm just talking deer 150 inches and bigger, there is not near as many as there was last year and in previous years. In fact, there's one place, I talk about, I put my cameras in the same places every summer because there's always bachelor groups in these same places. There's 2 places in particular that I've had cameras there for more years than I can remember, over a decade. And there's always a bachelor group in these places. And there's always at least a couple of 150 pluses in those bachelor groups. It's so bad this year that one of those places, and I just checked cameras on both these places this week, so I can give you some up-to-date info on the pictures I've got in both those places. One of those, I did not have a picture of a single buck, a single antlered buck of any size throughout the entire summer until just the past week or so. I had 2 individual bucks come by one time a piece. There was nothing there all summer. The other location, I never had a buck on camera all summer. And keep in mind, I'm talking for more than a decade. I've had a camera here at the same spot. There's always a bachelor group there. There's always at least 1 or 2 150 and better in that bachelor group. And sometimes there's giants. This year, there was not a single buck on that. And there was actually 2 cameras at this location. There was not a single buck on those cameras, those 2 cameras on that location all summer that would score 120 inches. Not a single one. And to kind of back up what I'm saying, I was talking to Wes Delks today, like I mentioned, and he's been running his cameras hard for, he said, 9 years. That he's been really serious about it. And he said he has never had more cameras out and never put more effort into getting pictures in the summer than he did this year. And this year is the worst year in the 9 years he's been running cameras in the summer. And he's not even, he's in a different state. He's in Indiana. There's a lot of reasons for this. I think that, well, we know how the states are, most states have let this whole CWD thing go to their heads. You know, they're trying to ban baiting and everything else. Well, also with CWD management, they do not like older age class animals in the herd, because the older age class animals supposedly are the ones most likely to have CWD. So I think the states are managing for a younger deer herd. They don't like those older animals. And you see it with extensions in the seasons, added weapons. You know, we've got these gun seasons that are extremely long. Kansas is looking at adding extra days in their rifle season right in the heart of the rut. You got Indiana that's got 3 weekends of rifle season, 2 full
Same
weeks
as
and a
Kentucky.
weekend on each end. And the age structure of the deer herds across the country is going down the toilet. And I think that the states are doing it because of CWD, because if you look at it, they're changing the laws in regard to baiting and supplemental feeding at the same time this is all going on. It just makes sense. They can do some of this stuff without giving us a reason. If they're going to ban baiting, they got to give the public an answer, or they're going to just get raked over the coals, which they are anyway. But when it comes to some of these other things, like adding days to the season,
Everybody cheers for that. They don't
yeah.
see what the reason is.
And then deer hunters are their own worst enemy, because, you know, everybody is looking for to kill more and to kill easier. They want easier. And in Illinois, we got a couple of questions coming up that are going to hit on a couple of these topics. But in Illinois, the crossbow was the killer. That was the last straw that just totally decimated the Illinois deer herd. It's not a fraction as good as it used to be, and it's going downhill. Literally, this year is the worst series of trail camera photos of bucks that I've ever had in my life, and I've been running trail cameras since they came out. Not to the degree I didn't start with the degree that I am today, but still, I've been running a lot of trail cameras over a lot of country for a lot of years, and this is hands down the worst. Now, I want to also touch on some things on another topic that's related, and you kind of touched on it, Terry, that I'm watching individual bucks from year to year. And what I noticed this year was that a lot of the older bucks lost inches. And I think it goes back to the drought that we had in May and June. May and June were extremely dry. And that's when those bucks are really starting to put it on. It kind of sets the stage for the entire growth cycle. Babe, my target buck for this year that I was hoping would put on several inches, I'm going to guess he lost probably 5 inches. There's a lot of bucks that have lost 5 to 10 inches. And I've talked to a lot of other people that said the same thing, that, you know, their older age class bucks actually went backwards this year. And it was just, I mean, most of them did. Now, I know of some really good 3 and 4 year old bucks too that made good antler jumps that I've been watching.
Right.
But the older mature bucks that had already kind of, you know, leveled out, most of them went backwards. And I think that was due to the weather.
I was talking about this subject with some friends of mine the other day, and I think maybe we've talked about it on the podcast, but a lot of people are focusing on the drought in May and June. But I think what people are also forgetting is we've been in a drought since last fall. So I think that there's a couple layers to this that maybe you can touch on a little bit. And we talk about stress of an animal, but I think they, even though we didn't have a really crazy hard winter, we only had that stretch right at Christmas Eve when it got, negative 30 wind chill in a lot part of the country. I still think that even though we didn't have a crazy hard winter, no moisture probably really hurt the nutrition of deer, even just eating without food plots, even just in row crop, because, we're going on almost a year across the entire Midwest of being in a drought.
Right. And just tonight, my wife and I went to town for supper, and on the way back, I commented, "Man, I'd sure like to see a rain because my food plots could use it." And she said, and she brought it up. She said, "Your food plots last fall were terrible too, remember?" And I said, "Yeah, you're right. They were terrible last fall." So that's a great point, Terry. You combine that drought that started last fall, lasted through the winter, and was really dry in May and June. In fact, I thought we were going to have a drought worse than 2012. And then the first 10 days of July, we got 6 inches of rain. If we wouldn't have got those July rains, we would have been really, really hurting.
You've often said that very rarely do you have a bad spring and a bad fall, but this is probably the closest we've ever had to having a hard spring and a hard fall for food plots.
Well, fortunately, at least in my case, my plots got off to a terrible start.
Right.
But when that rain hit in July, they had a root system on them and they exploded.
Yeah, I think everybody I've talked to that's planted NutriCrave corn, if the deer did not mow off the stalks early, they've had a bumper crop. Our buddy out at Chambers Customs out there, he posted pictures of ears of NutriCrave as long as his arm. So we know the corn crops did really well. I know some bean crops are a little light this year, whether it's because of, over browsing, by not being able to keep up with the deer, nipping the tops off. But at least the corn did really, really well this year for the most part.
Yeah, I just pulled a couple ears off my NutriCrave plot today. And man, I'll tell you what, they were a couple of the biggest ears I've ever seen on any kind of corn. I would put them up against any corn grown by any farmer anywhere in the country. They were as big as your forearm.
So Don, to back this up a little bit, there's two layers kind of to this buck forecast. And I think what I hear you saying is you're definitely not seeing the buck numbers that you've seen in the past. You're not seeing the age structure that you saw in the past, and the ones that you are seeing the age structure, you didn't see much antler growth. Is those three statements correct?
Yeah, the basically bucks over 3 years old and over, even 3-year-olds are a lot fewer in number than they have been in the past. So what's that going to mean 2 or 3 years from now? I mean, the 5-6-year-old bucks 2 or 3 years from now, they're not here today. And those bucks are going to go through a couple more hunting seasons and get whittled down even more. In 2 or 3 years, it's going to be a lot worse because deer hunters, being their own worst enemy, they can't lay off the trigger as a whole. There's individual deer hunters that are fantastic deer managers, but as a whole, the deer hunting public are terrible deer managers.
So I hate to be Debbie Downer here, but I guess the worst thing that could happen probably on top of this buck forecast is to have EHD hit. Are we out of the danger zone on EHD yet, or could we still possibly see that over the next 6 weeks?
Well, we could still see some for sure, but if we was going to have a major outbreak, I would expect to be hearing a lot of reports of dead deer right by now.
Okay.
You start getting them, late August, the first week or so of September, and I haven't heard of any locally, and very, very few across the country. Social media, when that happens, social media blows up with pictures of dead bucks people are finding in their ponds or creeks or whatever, and I've not seen any of that. So I'd say if there is any EHD, it's going to be minimal.
Well, that's good news at least, because I'm worried that that would be just the quadruple whammy on top of everything. Um, everything that you just said falls right in line with guys like Patrick and I that are running cameras everywhere. And the bucks that we had extremely high hopes for this year, they're still good deer. By no means are they not good deer, but they didn't do anything as far as put on antler growth. So I'm really struggling with it, honestly, because it's especially here in Kentucky where there isn't, a true giant to hunt. It's, going back to the buck management. It's like I'm sitting there looking at these young 1.5-year-old bucks, and I'm thinking some of these older, smaller bucks just need to be shot, whether it's me or somebody else, to hopefully just leave room for those guys. And if I have to wait 2 and 3 years for them to get older, then so be it. But it's really going to change a lot of perspective that I've had over the years of hunting here in Kentucky, especially.
It's going to get to the point where just about the only way you're going to be able to harvest a big, giant, mature buck is through own and deer management. You're going to have to, take the ball and take matters into your own hand, and have your own property, and that's just deer hunters. There's a big percentage of deer hunters who cannot afford to buy a chunk of land and manage it, especially a chunk big enough to have a real impact.
Right.
40 acres, but you're going to have very minimal impact managing 40 acres.
Yeah, and that's going to be really tough for guys like me, because, I think people misinterpret some comments that I've made about public land in the past. And, I tip my hat to the guys that hunt public land. I just don't have the patience for it. I'm just not. I love the land management side and the habitat side probably more than I do hunting, but I just can't deal with intrusion and pressure from others, because I know how vital that is to what the plan is that I'm trying to put together. And my style of hunting, I just couldn't deal with me setting up a spot to hunt and then having somebody walk through it next Tuesday looking around for a place to hunt 3 trees over. And if it gets to the point that the only option for me is public land, I'm honestly not sure what I'll do. I'm tickled pink that guys can do it, and they get in there and root around, and they're successful. I think it's a ton harder than what I have to do, but I just couldn't do it personally. It's a testament to those people and a negative against me, because I'm just not wired that way.
I've got a good friend that hunts public a lot, and he is a super hunter. I mean, he is really, really good, and he's killed some giant. He's killed a 200 on public.
Wow,
that's how good he is. And he just said the same thing that I'm saying about the overall deer herd, at least in the state of Illinois. He's seeing the same thing on public land. He said the older age class bucks just are not there. They're getting shot when they're 2 and 3, and he backs up my opinion that the crossbow in the archery season is when everything took a major downturn.
Well, I don't want to get too far on the gun seasons and the crossbows, because I think we have some really good questions that we can dive into that a little bit more. And I think people are going to be surprised at your answer on a couple of these, honestly. I'm interested how you're going to spin a couple of these. So let's to summarize your buck forecast in one sentence, though. What's 2023 going to be?
Well, in one sentence, there are always going to be some giants killed, but overall 2023 is going to be a terrible year for numbers of bucks scoring over 150 inches. And if I want to add a second sentence, I don't see things getting any better in the near future.
No, because there's not enough hunters out there that are willing to take a tag sandwich to let it go a year.
Yep.
They're gonna have to kill something. I don't. People talk a big game. You got all of these guests on all these podcasts that have never killed above a 130-inch deer that are now proclaimed experts that are trying to live up to the pressure of being in the industry. There's not enough people in the hunting community right now that I think can save this thing, because there's not enough people willing to not shoot a deer.
And the sad thing is that we are forced to live by the decisions of our game management agencies, DNR, conservation agencies, or whatever. They set the stage, and the majority of the hunters are going to do everything they possibly can that's allowed by law. If the law allows them to shoot 2 bucks, they're going to try to shoot 2 bucks. If the law allows them to hunt with a crossbow during archery season, they're going to. Well, if the law allows them to hunt 3 weeks with a rifle during the middle of the rut, they're going to do it. It's all about killing deer. They want to do it. They're going to take every advantage that the law allows them to have. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that if it's their choice, but the detriment is to the detriment of our deer herd, and all hunters are going to pay for the state's poor management.
There's a cost to all of that, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
You got to make your decision, but there's a cost to it. And we're going to get into this, and you know, you and I have both come on this podcast and said we don't care about crossbows, we don't care about guns, we don't care about rifles, straight wall cartridges. It's more what the DNR is letting people do, when and for how long. It's not the weapon, it's when and how long is causing so much of the fallout of this. And it's not that we're pro or anti, it's when it's when and for how long is the big part of it. So like you said, before we move on, there's going to be some big deer killed, and I forgot to mention it at the beginning. Our good friend Brandon Epperson, how about that boy on a second day of archery season killing an absolute giant velvet buck in Kentucky?
Was that 2 years in a row for Brandon?
So last year he shot one on opening morning, 2 different farm. Both farms he manages, but it was 2 different farms. This buck, he does not have a history. He actually found out about saw the deer behind his house. He killed that thing right out 250 yards off his back porch. Just a crazy story. And, you know, he was using trail camera data a little bit different than you, because he didn't have a history with this buck. Early in July, when he put mineral out, he was using Maximizer. He didn't even think this buck was going to be a shooter. And you talk about putting on time length and points going in every direction possible at his bases. He ended up being 27 points. He had a 6x7 frame that was just under 180 typical frame, and ended up being right around 200 with non-typical points. And Don, I have never seen anything like this thing on the bases and back in behind his ears. There was stuff, I don't even know how you score it, to be honest with you, because there's points going every direction and splits, and it being in velvet even made it even more complicated. But I mean, who cares? He was an absolute giant. If you're not careful and you just take a glance at the picture, he looks like a 175, 180 inch deer. But holy cow, when you look at the different angles of all of the stuff out the back on these extra non-typical points, just it racks up quick when you start getting that many.
Yep. Well, congratulations to Brandon. Great guy. I'm happy to see him successful.
But what I meant to circle back, what I was saying about trail camera data is, believe it or not, he was getting midday movement out of that deer. He was getting daylight pictures of that deer, and they don't know if he was going to water or what, but he was getting daylight pictures of it. So I went with him opening morning. He has a place that we could slip in without bumping any deer in the morning. And we went and didn't see him in the morning. But that Brandon got in the tree. It's like 102 heat index. He got in the tree at noon on Saturday and sat there all day in that heat. And he saw the buck at 2:00 at like 20 yards and didn't have a shot, and then saw him again at 7 on opening day. So he goes back in on Sunday, gets in at noon after church, and ends up shooting him at like 5:00 in the afternoon. But I mean, I give him credit. He read the trail camera data and went in after him, but I'm a dedicated hunter, and I don't know that I could sit there in that heat for that long through the afternoon.
I probably wouldn't have done it either, but good for Brandon.
Yeah. Congratulations, buddy. We actually have footage of it. So he came over the other night and we downloaded it. We're going to try to put together a little hunting video for him so he can share the story of it. But fantastic opening weekend buck 2 years in a row for our friend Brandon Epperson. Congratulations. So we're going to move on to the first question of the night from another good friend of ours. And boy, he was getting a little froggy and salty in this first question, wasn't he? I was laughing when I saw this one.
This one comes from famous Amos Hirschberger from Beach City, Ohio.
Famous Amos.
He says, Don and Terry, love the podcast. Congratulations on your new grandson. Praying for your daughter and family. Appreciate that, Amos. Thank you. Question 1. Do you think it's too late to go to the back of my property and make a setup for the huge buck that I'm suspecting that my neighbor has on his property? Putting in the buck bed, making all the 750 scrapes needed to keep him busy, hanging the love swing to shoot him out of with my crossbow while he eats off the corn pile that's right on my side of the fence. I'm afraid walking all through my dough factory to create this will be a little too much pressure in the next week. What are your thoughts? Well, Amos, I can tell you my thoughts are that you've spent way too much time on the internet. You need to quit watching YouTube videos and just listen to Chasing Giants and forget all the other garbage. So,
hey,
so that's my thought.
Before you move on to his second question, we can laugh about that. But the kid that did the 750 scrapes, that was a legit story. He contacted me via social media, and it was not somebody playing a joke on us. They worked their tail off and put that on there. So we'll see I told him, I said, you tell us how that works this year. But that was not a joke. They worked their rear ends off that day.
If he kills a giant, we're going to have to get him on for a little bit of an interview on one of these podcasts.
Yep. Sounds like a plan. All right. Go on to question number 2 from famous Amos.
Okay, question 2. What are your thoughts on how much the early drought, end of May, had to do with the older age class bucks antler score going backwards? Older age class being 5+ year old. I would say almost all of our older bucks went backwards in score, anywhere from a few inches to 30+ inches. Do you think they'll bounce back next year with favorable antler growing conditions? Love to hear your and Terry's thoughts on this. Thanks, Amos. Amos, you're spot on. I have no doubt that early drought is what caused it. And to answer your question, will they bounce back next year? If we have favorable growing conditions, absolutely. They could come back and be bigger than they've ever been. They were really set behind right out of the gate this year, and we're just never able to catch up afterwards. And you know, again, if I use Babe for an example, you know, when I put my cameras out the 1st of July and got the first pictures of Babe, which was about, I think, the 14th or 15th of July, by that point, he's already got his frame determined. And he went from being that 5x5 main frame back to I would call him a 5x4. But he lost the stickers and everything else.
I don't think he has quite as, what's his mass compared to last year?
I think he's got every bit the mass, but I don't think he's got the width.
Yeah.
He don't have the width, and he don't have
points.
the number of tines. Lost the stickers. It's because of the weather, no doubt about it.
Yeah, the interesting thing to kind of build off Amos's question that I think we need to keep in the back of our mind is now that we've followed this story for the last year, what are ideas that we can keep in the back pocket as we plan for spring of next year? If there's anything, there might not even be anything other than try the same thing and hope it rains. But, I just keep continuing to worry the more these DNRs cut out feeding and different tools that we can use to offset whatever Mother Nature throws at us. I'm becoming even more worried if things don't turn around with Mother Nature.
Well, I've got some ideas and I'm going to implement on my farm, and I probably shouldn't even said that because now I'm going to have to kind of reveal what they are. But I'm taking my food plots to a whole new level. My deer are never going to run out of food, no matter what month of the year it is, and it's not going to be there. Oh, it's the end of February. I still got soybeans. No, it's the end of February. I still got soybeans. I still got corn. I still got some greens. The clover is soon going to be turning green as things warm up. My deer are going to have the best nutrition they can possibly have. It's all going to be in the plots. I'm going to take soil fertility in my plots to the next level. I'm going to be doing some things that I've never heard anyone in the hunting industry talk about. I'm going to document that on the Whitetail Master Academy videos. Some products that have never been talked about that are used in like organic farming and things.
Yep.
So I'm going to have variety of food, but I'm also going to do everything I can within my soil to improve the nutrient makeup of every one of those different crops.
I've been thinking about the same thing on my properties, and one of them in particular, my weakest link is water. And Austin is already, when Austin was out there helping me put the 360 blind up, we were already talking about that. That's on the docket for as soon as we can get, depends on what the ground is, if it's obviously frozen, but that's going to be the first thing, is making sure that the deer do not have to leave my property for water. And right now I don't have it. So we're going to be digging a really big hole this coming year.
If you can keep that thing full of water without human intrusion, you're really going to be ahead of the game. I need to share some information that one of my, he's not a consulting client, I guess, but a real world customer for many years. And back when I had the tree nursery, he bought a lot of trees from me as well. But he's got a water source on his property that's very unique, and I want to share some pictures with you if you remind me.
Okay.
And probably won't share them on social media because I may make a video about that too, with his permission.
Well, I'm not thinking of making a watering hole. I'm thinking of making a lake. So we're talking about building a big hole. So, all right. Well, thanks for your question, Amos. We always appreciate hearing from you. We'll move on to question number 2.
This one comes from Andrew Bontrager from Monticello, Kentucky. He says, "Hello, Don and Terry. Thanks for all the useful information on the podcast. I enjoy each one. With hunting season coming up, I do not remember of you ever talking about using a bleat can. Is this something you use? Why or why not? Also, have you ever taken your wife along hunting with you? Would you consider letting her shoot Babe or one of your target bucks? Thanks for your input." Andrew, first of all, my wife has no interest whatsoever in hunting. She has went with me and sitting blinds. Actually, she's sitting tree stands with me too. But she has no interest whatsoever in shooting anything. As far as letting her shoot Babe, again, she has no interest, but I'll just leave that at that. In regards to bleat cans, yeah, I used to carry a bleat can with me, and they work. There's no doubt about it. They have worked. The older I got, the more experience I got, the more I realized that, a mature buck is already very, very, very alert. He's one of the most alert creatures in the whole woods. And when you use anything, a call, a scent, or whatever, you've just taken him to the next level. You made him hyper alert. So when he comes in and you've used that bleat can, grunt call, whatever, he's coming in looking. He knows there's something there. It's one thing when he's walking through the woods and he's just scanning his surroundings, making sure the coast is clear. He's super alert then, but you take it to the next level when you throw out some kind of call, because now he knows there's something there and he's doing his best to detect it, whether it be another deer, a hunter, or whatever. And for that reason, the only time I'll use a call today is when I see a buck I want to shoot and he's out of my range and he's not coming towards me. It's kind of a last ditch effort to make that buck, to hopefully get that buck to turn and come my direction. But when those bleat cans first came out, they were deadly. I mean, you turn that thing over and if there was a deer within earshot, it was more than likely coming in to check it out.
Yep. I think by today's standard, a mature buck's probably heard and seen it all, don't you think?
Absolutely.
This is the biggest step we've taken in reducing vibration and sound since 3D damping. What will my new setup do for me that my last year setup did not? Matthew's pioneered damping. We own silence. We own stealth.
Next one comes from Trevor Pomeroy from Fargo, North Dakota. He says, "Hey, Don, you often talk about how you use trail cams for years to watch bucks and their patterns. However, what if you just got permission and have a mature giant on it? How would you be using those trail cams and transfer that information to hunt him without previous year's data?" Well, in that case, you would just use them as most people do. You know, they got those cameras out and, hey, the buck I want to shoot, he happens to be walking by this point, so I'm going to try to catch him at this point, or he hits this particular scrape, so I'm going to hunt over this particular scrape, or I've got him at daylight at this place, so I'm going to go and try to catch him at daylight again. If you don't get him that first season, that really puts you at a huge advantage the following year, because then you've got that data. You know, you got the date and time he was at each place, and you're not a step behind hoping he does it again. You're there waiting on him to do it the first time. So, you know, you're basically doing the same thing, but you're just acting on the intel you get a little bit late. Instead of being there early waiting, you're there late hoping he does it again that season.
And you don't want to burn the spot up checking your trail camera versus hunting. That's right. If you know that giant's there, hunt it, not necessarily worry about scouting it. So that's the other thing. I think people get a picture of a big deer, they want 30 pictures of a big deer, and they end up burning their spot out checking cameras versus hunting.
Okay, the next one comes from Garrett Rollins from Tremont, Illinois. He says, "Don, I have listened to your stance on crossbows in Illinois many times. If I understand correctly, this season will be the first time some rifles are allowed in Illinois' firearm season. I am curious if your opinion on this is the same as with crossbows. Do you think adding rifles to the allowed weapons will make the sport too easy? Thanks for all you do. I look forward to hearing your opinion." Well, Garrett, no, I do not think that this is going to have near the impact that the crossbows in archery season do. The calibers of rifles that are being allowed, those straight wall cartridges, it has to be a single shot. Think about it. With a shotgun, you're allowed 3 slugs. So you got 3 shots. You've got to take that down to one single cartridge. And those straight walled cartridges really are probably the range of those is probably not much different than the shotgun. I see that rule as having very, very minimal impact on the resource. The crossbow is a totally different animal. The crossbow is basically taken that army of gun hunters and brought them to the archery season for 3.5 months using a weapon that's far more effective at a longer range than your average compound bow shooter is going to be shooting deer. Sure, you can get on outdoor TV or whatever. You can see guys shooting deer at 50, 60 yards of their compounds, but there is actually not that many bow hunters out there doing that consistently year after year. Now, they may be throwing arrows out that far, but guys that are consistently shooting their deer and killing their deer, it's not like that. The crossbow changes that. The big thing the crossbow does is it brings so many more hunters into that 3.5 month long archery season. And then it puts them there with a weapon that's just significantly more effective than a traditional bow.
Again, it's not as much about the weapon, it's when and for how long.
Right.
So, you got a situation where historic gun hunters in Illinois were allowed to shoot one buck with a shotgun. Well, now they're shooting a buck with a shotgun and they're shooting it with a crossbow. So, it's changing the age structure in every state that's allowing it. We're actually experimenting with the straight wall cartridge right now. I posted, I think a couple weeks ago, that I purchased a Brenton firearm, which is a high-end AR hunting rifle in 350 Legend. And I've been experimenting. Actually, hang on a second.
I think we're going to get a chance to have a peek view of this new rifle that Terry just went to get. Yep,
a
there
sneak
it is.
peek for those watching it. So, fortunately, I live in a state that allows us to use suppression. So I've already gotten my silencer on there. So it's gonna be hard to fit in the frame. But Brenton Firearms is made in Michigan. Actually, the new ownership team of this was a land consultant of yours, Don, back in the day, I believe. Is that right?
Well, actually, I went up there and I did a seminar at on the owner's farm for a QDMA chapter. And then we did a farm tour on his property after the seminar.
Yep. So, I was evaluating this cartridge. Now, I got my gun in, I believe, probably about 3-4 weeks ago. And at 100 yards, the 5th, 6th, and 7th shot, the bullet holes were touching at 100 yards. So that was with a little lighter load than what I'll be using when I'm hunting. I think I'm going to be using about 180 grain with it this year. Now, obviously, I can't use suppression in Illinois, and we'll have to use a magazine to where it's not multiple rounds. We understand the rules. But this thing's going to shoot probably around the same muzzle velocity and range as what my Savage 20 gauge bolt shotgun's going to be. So I don't see a huge advantage of I think the gun will be much more accurate, than the slug guns. But, I would challenge people to say that these new muzzle loaders, and I have one. I had one built for the fun of it. I really enjoy that long range, not hunting, but long range muzzleloader shooting. They're making muzzleloaders now that are 500, 600 yard guns. So I would argue that the muzzle loading laws are probably going to affect things more than the straight wall cartridge laws is how I would probably spin the question.
I agree with that 100%. And, it goes right back to what we were saying earlier when we was talking about the buck forecast. It's muzzle loaders was a primitive weapon. If you go back 30, 40 years ago, muzzle loaders got a special season because they were much harder to use than the modern firearm.
Right.
Archery got a long season at the beginning, when the white-tailed deer, expanded in the Midwest and states opened up gun seasons or deer seasons for the first time back in like the 1950s. Bow hunters, the success, I remember when I started, the success rate for bow hunters every year was in the single digits. You know, 5, 6, 7% success rate.
Yeah.
100 bow. Think about that. 100 bow hunters went out, and only 6 or 7 of them were successful, killing any deer.
The deer
Today,
numbers were a lot lower back then too, though. So
that's true. A lot of it
Yeah.
was the equipment as well.
yeah, absolutely.
And we've come a long way.
I remember my grandfather was real big into bow hunting very early, and talking about stories of having to take a towel up in the tree that he would climb up in, because there weren't any tree stands. You just stand in the crotch of a tree or set on a limb that was a little horizontal and hope you didn't slide out if it was wet, and you had to take a towel up there to set on so it wasn't so slippery. So I think the whole evolution of the hunting industry has changed a lot. But yeah, I'm excited about this 350 Legend, especially using this Brenton piece this year. I'm gonna be using it. I know, and I think you are gonna let the grandsons actually use it on your property. If you're all right with talking about that, but I think that's the plan. Is the boys are gonna get the gun hunt on the Higgins home farm this year.
They are. You know, one thing that I got to give the state of Illinois DNR credit for is their youth season. The youth can buy, like my grandsons coming from out of state can come and hunt with me on a $10.50 youth tag. And, you know, that sure beats a $450 or whatever it is dollar non-resident tag.
Right.
So I do appreciate the fact that they look out for the youth, and we're going to take advantage of that. My grandsons are coming for that youth season, and we're going to be using the Brenton 350 Legend and seeing how it works on some whitetails, hopefully.
Yep. So we're going to talk more about, I actually want to have those guys on the podcast at some point, because I want them to talk a little bit about, I'm a firearm enthusiast, so, and I work in manufacturing. So all these pieces and parts that go in firearms, I work with them on a daily basis. And there's some really cool things that are a little bit different about this gun that makes it just not another black rifle. It is a precision hunting rifle on an AR platform. And I'm really tickled to have a chance. We bought these guns at full retail price. It wasn't one of those deals, but you know, very, very close to finding a way with working with these guys to help spread the word. I'm excited about working with these guys and shooting their rifles. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely.
All right. I think that was, get my bearings. There we go. This is, I think, the last question of the night.
This one comes from Adam Valencian. Hope I said that right. From Chillicothe, Illinois. He says, Don and Terry, thanks for all you guys do to keep educating hunters and sharing your real life experiences in doing so. My question is about making mistakes. I've often asked myself if I'd rather have my wall filled with the bucks I've been fortunate to harvest, or with the bucks I've had an opportunity at, but made a mistake that cost me a chance at a shot or recovery. As time goes on, I'd like to think most of us learn from our mistakes and use that to be more successful when the next opportunity arises. Do either of you have any stories along with the mistakes you've made that have cost you an opportunity at a great buck? Would love to hear a few examples and how you may have turned that into a lesson learned for the next time. P.S. I remember Terry talking about not standing to shoot last year, so I'm sure that one is near the top of his list. Thanks again for all you do, Adam. Adam, you know, I remember having a conversation with Al Foster. I'm probably 30 years ago. And I told Al at that time, I said, I probably only killed about a third of the good bucks that I've had within range of my stand, and 2/3 of them got away. And Al kind of looked at me and he's like, well, I'm killing probably at least 80% plus of the ones, you know, that I get in. He killed almost all of them. If he got a shot at them, if they came in within bow range of his stand, they was typically a dead deer. Well, I think that's where experience comes in, because today, if I get the buck that I want to shoot in range of my stand, he's pretty much dead. But as I look back at some of the mistakes I've made, one really stands out. I mean, I've talked in the past about the cedar house buck and how that was probably one of the a 200-inch buck that got away from me that I had a shot at. But one that really jumps out at me because I made the mistake, and it happened on Thanksgiving morning, and this was probably 30 years ago. And I'd always wanted to kill a buck on the holidays. It was a big deal to me when I was younger. Today, it's not such a big deal. But back in the day, I wanted to kill a buck on Halloween. I wanted to kill one on Thanksgiving. I wanted to kill one on Christmas because those holidays were all in archery season. And to this day, I've never killed one on a holiday. But there was one Thanksgiving morning that I had an opportunity. And the thing of it was, I seen this buck for the first time 2 days previous. And when I seen him and I seen what he did, I didn't have a shot at him. He was out of range by a little bit, but I had a 1.5-year-old buck run a doe right under my tree. And he was grunting and chasing this doe around. And the way he was acting, he was just a 1.5-year-old buck, so you don't know for sure. But he was acting like that doe was about to come in heat. And they ran past my stand, or right under my stand, and going away from me. And in front of my stand and to the right, about 100 yards, was this little thicket. And I knew that bucks like to bed there, but I was like in a pinch point along a narrow spot where the woods followed this creek. And there was basically a few trees on each side of the creek and some brush, but it narrowed down in this pinch point. That's where my stand was at. But as that 1.5-year-old buck chased that doe under my tree, and he was grunting and they was making noise, running in the leaves and everything, this big buck comes out of this thicket, and he joins the chase. He heard it going on, and he comes out and he joins. Well, he's 50 yards in front of me, and he's moving and running and chasing. But anyway, to make a long story short, that trio of deer, the 2 bucks and that doe, they eventually take off across an open field and totally vacate the area where my stand was at. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm thinking, that doe is coming into heat. That mature buck is going to be with her for about 2 days. And in 2 days, he's going to be back bedding in that thicket where I just watched him come out of. And so I knew the deer had vacated the area and was nowhere close. I climbed down from my stand, and I knew what the weather report was for the next. That stand I was in required a northwest wind. And I knew it was supposed to warm up and the wind was going to switch to the south. And I didn't have a stand where I could hunt that little thicket with a south wind. So I immediately climbed down, knowing the target buck was gone. He ran across the field with that doe. I went to my truck, I grabbed a stand, and I came back and I picked out a tree and I hung that stand for a south wind, thinking that in 2 days that doe's going to come in heat, go out of heat. He's going to come back and bed in that thicket again. Thanksgiving morning, 2 days later, I before daylight, I climb up in that stand, and I'll be darned if it wasn't 30 minutes after daylight, here comes that buck just as I had planned. And I mean, this was 30 years ago when I was just starting to barely put some of the pieces of the puzzle together. And I was so proud of myself because I'd figured that buck out, and it was just playing out exactly as I had it figured. And that buck's coming by my stand, and I go to draw my bow, and I get my bow at about 2/3 of the way back. It's not even at full draw, 2/3 of the way back. And I trip my release, and my arrow just goes about half speed off my bow and crashes into the brush by that buck, not even close to hitting him. And what happened was I'd bought a new pair of gloves, and that new pair of gloves had that cuff over the fingers like a mitten. It was like a mitten type glove with that flap, comes and covers your fingers. And then you open that flap, and then you got your bare fingers. And I thought, man, that'll be great for using that release. Well, when I was drawing, that flap on that glove somehow caught on my release. And that was the first time I'd ever wore those gloves on a hunt. Do you think I ever wore them again? No, no way. That was the only hunt those gloves ever went on. But I learned my lesson that you don't ever break in new equipment in the middle of season. You stick with the tried and the true. And that's, to this day, I mean, Terry will tell you, some of the stuff I use is almost prehistoric, that if it works, I don't change it. But that's one buck that got away from me, and a mistake that I made, bringing a new piece of equipment to the woods right in the middle of season that I'll never do again.
I think when you have something like that happens to a really big deer or a target deer, I think it makes a whole lot of difference than what happened to me last year, where I didn't stand up for a management buck. I wasn't too disappointed, honestly. I think if I would have been more engaged, it probably would have panned out different. But I'm going to spin it a little differently and probably go a different direction than Adam really wanted. But I think when you're hunting mature bucks, I don't think people realize they mess up as much as they do, because I think every outdoorsman is going to have where they don't stand up, or they, their arrow hits a fence, a piece of fence or a limb, or, something. If that doesn't happen to you, you're not hunting enough, because there's always going to be that kind of stuff. But I really think most hunters don't realize how much they mess up by hunting the wrong wind at the wrong time. And they never know that they blew that buck, or they pressured that buck, or that buck's not going to stand up. I think that's where most people, and there isn't a tangible, observation of what they messed up with, because that buck never stood up, or that buck snuck out the back way. I think that's where most hunters mess up, but unfortunately they don't know it. And I keep saying on this podcast time after time, once this thing clicks about mature bucks and using and hunting the wind, it simplifies it so much that it starts clicking, that I'm not going to say it's easy, but the amount of deer you start seeing and you're on top of goes exponentially, and you're hunting a small percentage of the time you were before. So I know, Adam, that's not where you wanted me to go with this. I mean, I posted made a video, I believe on Labor Day, about hunting over bait piles. And, that would be an example of what your question is I was showing people how to make a bait pile and hunt over it by putting a hay bale on the back side of it. So when the deer come up, they have to turn sideways or quarter away from you, versus have their nose facing at you, so that you get an ethical shot. Most people that hunt over a bait pile, they just put it there and it never fails. The deer walks in and you got 4 does looking straight at you that you would never get a shot if a shooter comes. So there's stuff like that every hunter is going to learn over time based on experience. And unfortunately, I think today everybody's looking for the quick fix to not learn the school of hard knocks a little bit. But maybe I'm just old school. I think sometimes hunters need to learn some of those lessons a little bit. That's what makes them better.
Well, when you get a target buck in close and he gets away, that's part of it. And, I remember that hunt just as much as if I would have killed that deer.
Yep.
And the crazy thing of it is I did everything right. I figured what that buck was going to do, and he did exactly what I thought he was going to do. And he did it on Thanksgiving morning. I was going to get my Thanksgiving buck, and that just adds to the story. And that's what makes deer hunting so fun, is even when the ones get away, you still got a story for the rest of your life.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a fun episode. A little depressing about the buck forecast, I won't lie, but it's just the cards we're dealt with. The big question for all the listeners right now is not necessarily the age structure question, but the deer number question. And as you're evaluating your goals in your season, are you prepared to have a tag sandwich for the betterment of the herd on your property? And I think everybody needs to really think about that a little bit as we're dealing with what we could potentially be dealing with. I hope everybody has a giant to chase, but I don't think that's going to happen this year.
There's going to be less bucks over 150 inches shot than there has been in a decade anyway.
So, well, everybody's got to make the decision that's best for them. And yeah, I think you probably surprised people a little bit with some of those answers. So that was a good episode. Good questions. For those new listeners that we've picked up over the last couple of weeks, if you want to submit a question, we provide a free Chasing Giants t-shirt back if we use it on air. So you can submit those questions by going to Higgins Outdoors or chasinggiants.com and going to the podcast page. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can submit it. But you have to put all your information in there. If you leave your address out, we don't use the question on the podcast because we have no way of mailing you your shirt. So we appreciate everybody, though. We've gotten a lot of new listeners, which that happens every hunting season as the fall approaches. We get another spike around, and we run off some of them pretty quick, but a lot of you stay, and we appreciate that.
If you're a good old country boy and you love this country, and you're not afraid to stand on your values, you're going to like it around here. We're glad to have you and hope you stick around.
All right. Well, we'll keep you updated not only about hunting season approaching, our 2 speaking engagements next week, but also Andrea. We appreciate the prayers and support as we're out running around. Look forward to meeting everyone that's going to be at these events. It's going to be a good time.
Yep. Well, God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.